like to start the April 11th, 2019 workshop for the Planning Commission. It is now 5:01. First thing up on the agenda is the Moab Parking Management Plan. Who wants to talk about that?
Chuck, our city engineer, is here to introduce the project, and
Okay.
Thomas McMurdy is the consultant with all the answers, right? That's right.
So thanks for having us here. This project started due to a couple of things. One is the condition of parking in the downtown area where there are problems. And the second is with the Highway 191 widening, which will essentially, project that UDOT's undertaken, which will essentially go from 400 north out to the river. Most, if not all of the, I think all is the better word, of all the on-street parking in that stretch will go away. So this was an opportunity to evaluate the situation, which kind of sets the stage for analysis and an action plan of what we're trying to do to address those issues. So with that, we know we only have till 5:30, so we've got a lot of information. And if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead. I'll turn it over to Thomas, and he'll take you through the results of the study. And we'll try and have time for you to ask questions if you have any, or if not, that's okay too.
Well, I was just glad to see that according to the study, we really don't have a problem.
That's true.
Except for certain areas.
Right.
Lunchtime and dinner time.
Right.
So, yeah, there is kind of a lot to go over, and in fact, if you see something, it might be best to just interrupt me if you have a question or a concern kind of as we go. So I wanted to just kind of start talking about project goals. The big thing for us was to understand the true nature of parking out there, to answer the questions of, do we have enough? Is it in the right spaces, places, that type of stuff. And so we set out to do a very detailed inventory of all the parking, to then measure all of the utilization of the parking in the study area, and then to calculate both the use and the utilization of the parking, as well as the parking duration, so how long vehicles sit in individual spaces, and then to compare that to an estimated demand to make sure that our supplies are meeting our demands, or just kind of how we're doing, and finally to come up with recommendations based on all that data to then make data-driven decisions or come up with some clear recommendations. And so that's what we set out to do. I believe you guys got a copy of our report. The last 2 pages are just kind of the recommendations table of kind of like final takeaways, and the first 35 pages are a lot of like data and kind of analysis and kind of.
Do I have a question right before you get started? On page 9, they talk about the drone flights on the weekends and weekdays.
Yes, ma'am.
What time of the year was that?
These were all done on May 17th and 18th. Okay. The dates of the flights are noted.
Just missed that.
It's in here.
That's okay. May's fine. That's all I needed to know.
Oh, here it is. It's on page 9, right underneath the photograph. It says May 17th and Friday,
there.
May 18th.
So
2 flights, 10 hours. The whole detail is in there.
Okay, thank you.
Those are good questions. In fact, I will tell you, so we worked with Chuck to kind of define the study area that we were going to analyze, and it's kind of here on the map. We couldn't fly or collect data everywhere, but we wanted to target, the heart of downtown Main Street, but we also wanted to get areas around Swanee Park, in front of City Hall, on 4th East, where there's some businesses. We want to look at parking on Williams Way. And so this is kind of the way we kind of put it together for how we were going to fly or measure our parking use. The way we did this was we collected flights. We flew 2 drones, well, 1 drone twice every hour on the hour for these 2 days of May 17th and May 18th last year. I can tell you why we targeted those days, but we flew from 9 to 7. We had to ground the bird around 7 p.m. Because of the light in the sky. But you can see we flew 40 flights and collected over 10,000 aerial photographs. We then, and this is just one of the images you can see, we then had somebody go through every single photograph and mark every single space that had a car in it. So like, for example, you can see here, there's if this mouse works, like here's a red Jeep, and then here's a red pickup truck, and so they had to mark, okay, that space is occupied, and the next space is also occupied. But then Allison, that same person, had to do the very next hour, and she had to look to see if it was a different car that was occupying the space, because we had to know if there was that job. Oh my gosh, it burned her brain. I feel bad. Her name was Nicole. Anyway, so she went through
Thanks,
all the data.
Nicole.
Yes.
Props to her.
Yeah, and so, but one of the things we found is on average in our study area, on every single hour, we had about 150 spaces that were occupied by a new vehicle.
Wow.
occupied, but by a different vehicle than the hour before, and she had to go through. Besides that, she actually had 7 different codes of how to mark spaces. The dates that we flew were the 17th and the 18th. We targeted that weekend because we wanted to be a pretty representative use of for the area. And after the fact, we went through and actually calculated for a 365 day period from August 1st to July of last year, and those dates ranked number 5th and 17th respectively for the most use based on cross-street traffic. So we think we got some real, if you look at these dates, the number 1 and 2 day was car show weekend, the number 3 day was Memorial Day weekend, but our dates were number 5th and 17th. So this was not a bad use day. It's very representative of the type of stuff we would see out there.
What I was surprised was that there weren't more November, September dates, October dates in here.
Isn't that surprising?
I think of that as the other peak season.
I think it is the second season.
Yeah.
It's just the first season is such a higher.
Right.
Yeah, spring is way busier.
That's right. So yeah, so there's no September dates.
There's 2
Is there?
September dates and 1 October date in the third
Okay.
and fourth column
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can see
Yeah.
On certain areas. Yep.
on Center Street.
Anyway, so
Particularly in 2017, it would have been interesting because it was a bad snow year and we had
Yeah.
people in town a heck of a lot later in 2017
Sure.
fall.
Yeah.
So this is the inventory of the actual spaces. You can see how we measured and marked. We created a GIS file, so there's an individual shape file for every single one of the areas, and they're all coded up. This image on the map shows you which ones are coded as occupied, they're filled in purple, and which ones are coded as vacant on this particular date, which was the 5 p.m. on May 17th, and they don't have a color. They're like a gray or a transparent color. So 1,462 total parking spaces that were public, with just a few private spaces that we looked at in our study area. So it was a lot. This doesn't matter that much. I looked at just the trends.
I
So
think this is fascinating,
yes, it's,
personally.
it's simply fun. The single space that turned over the most is right here on 100 in front of the co-op, is it? That
Yeah.
had 19 different cars on 20 different hours.
I was
We-
literally
we
parked in
could-
that space 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
so
And
that's
we could have
hysterical.
guessed that, and it's one of the most dangerous places because the
Yeah.
people aren't watching when they're crossing the street. There's bikes in that area. There's cars pulling in and out. It's awful.
Post office,
Yeah. post
chaos.
office.
Yeah, it really can be. Our highest peak hour, again, total is this 1462 at the bottom. The highest peak hour of utilization only had 768 occupied.
Yeah.
So we aren't filling up every space in the study area. In fact, this is that graph that shows the total occupied against the whole supply, right? The supply against demand across time. And you can see we go above 50%, but we never go much higher than that. Again, this is the entirety of the area, so it's not localized, it's everything. And so in general, you could look at this and say, well, seems like we got plenty of parking. If you zoom into specific areas, to me, this might be the single one map, or maybe not this map, but this version of this map that says, okay, tell me the story in one picture, and I would kind of point you here, because this is the utilization by city block, right, and color-coded. So you can see we do have areas, right, Center Street west of Main is above 95% utilization in the peak hour. And so that area, you could argue, doesn't have enough parking, right? Where other areas are green and yellow, and there's clearly, spaces available in those areas.
Did you guys analyze the parking lot off Center Street?
Yes,
within
ma'am.
this? Oh.
And I will show it to you in 3 slides. So this is, and we can kind of go through these quickly, but this is just the individual utilization. While this map shows the utilization overall for an entire city block of the entire city, this is zoomed into the individual space. So, this is the utilization over time. So how many hours of the day are these individual spots occupied on average? And you can see, again, red means that they're full, and green means that they're never full. And so looking at the park, you can see only in front of the rec center is it really getting filled up. This is the north, kind of north of 200 north of Main, and there's a couple of spaces in front of Canyon Voyage that look like a staging area because there was vehicles there constantly, like every single hour. But other areas kind of rotated out in terms of where people were parking and how they were parking. This shows the lot that you were just asking about and its utilization
Oh, I see.
over time.
That's interesting.
By the way, the lot never had more than 61% utilization in any of the hours that we flew. So it's got 71 spaces in it, I believe, and the highest utilization we saw had like 38 vehicles parked there. And
That's the one that's behind the food truck park?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Anecdotally, if I can, when Thomas made his last presentation, we decided we changed some signage and added some signage, and that
Yeah.
lots get
It
utilized.
is.
I would agree with that. I've noticed it.
People turn in there a lot off Center
Yeah.
Street when they realize Center is not gonna be
Yesterday
lucrative for
lunchtime-
them.
Yeah, yesterday at lunchtime, there was not a space available.
Yeah,
Okay.
Then we tried to get our drone up, but it was too much rain, just to
Yeah.
say it does happen.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and
It's-
at dinner, it's always full too.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah, 'cause that's right behind your office.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the south side of Center Street, right in front of the hotel from Pasta J's kind of over, is the most utilized area. I think there's 22 spaces there, and they were always occupied.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to park there, not enough. You're fighting to find something. And then you can see this is kind of the south side of Main Street, and you do see a lot more yellow and orange, and even some red areas where again, you could argue that there's not enough space. But you can see the MIC here too. The MIC gets much more utilization than the city lot or had.
Right.
And there's fewer spaces. So this is kind of, again, the same map that we showed before. And this is just kind of, so you can get a sense of kind of where the individual parking kind of had occurred as you took a look at it. One of the things we specifically noted was parking loss, right? On Main Street, on average, we were losing something between 14 and 25% of all of the spaces that are there because people weren't parking close enough to the vehicle in front of them. If you leave 6 or 8 feet, you can't squeeze you only get 2 cars and 3 spaces.
Yeah.
And so this
Way too
picture just shows a van with the trailer, and they're blocking 3 parking spaces that you're just losing, right? And so people would argue there might not be enough space on Main Street, but you guys are losing quite a bit just because it's not delineated. And this is kind of, I don't want to get into the weeds too much. All of these individual graphs are in the report, but what they show is they break down the individual blocks, and you get to see the utilization across time. We highlighted anything above 85% because 85% is typically the goal for most parking. As we provide parking, we try to provide about 85% should be used and about 15% should be available. And so anything below that line is good. Anything above it is starting to get a little overused. And then each of these also highlight how much space we were losing. So you can see here we're losing, 25% of the spaces to, poor parking or large vehicles or whatever. And then you can see the parking lots as well. The MIC is much more utilized than the city lots. Again, there's fewer spaces and people use it, and there's RVs that kind of block several spaces.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it because it's visible?
Largely
Yeah.
too,
Is
yeah.
that-
People see the MIC and the lots right there. Whereas to get to the city lot, you have to drive down that skinny little
Information
stretch.
center.
I just wondered if that was why it was more utilized, was because it was visible from Main Street. People see that there's a parking lot and they
Yeah.
jump
And
over there.
you do have 4 restaurants right there.
Right.
You got Eddie's and the sushi.
And it's really central to lots of things.
Yeah.
That's some oversized parking.
Yeah,
Right.
Which utilizes oversized parking.
right,
Whereas
Right.
the city lot doesn't have any.
right, okay,
I think that attracts people.
Yeah.
sure.
Yep, those are all the exact same reasons. One of the things we tried to do is measure the duration. Because we can look at every photograph and see if the same car was there, we can measure how long cars are parking in different areas.
Nicole can.
Yes, she gave us the data, and I'm looking at the data saying, hey, what's the average time here? And so if we are rotating vehicles out appropriately, the truth is our average should be 1.5 hours or less. And that's universally, we're kind of higher than that. And to me, what's most notable is the area of highest demand. Main Street by Center on the west side and Center Street on the west side of Main are 2.7 and 2.9 hours. In looking at the raw data, going through the individual photos, we are getting maybe 2 vehicles a day to fill in those spaces. Those ones that are most occupied. One guy parks there for 3 or 4 hours, and you might get a second vehicle that can also park there for 3 or 4 hours, and that is it. We are not rotating out vehicles every hour, every 2 hours.
I wish I knew what they were doing for 3 hours. What can they do?
I'm
At
really
the Moab
curious.
Information Center?
I
No,
think the
anywhere
answer
along-
to that is, and I've heard from business owners, is that there's employees parking.
I was
That's
just gonna
what I
ask, I
wondered.
wonder how many people that work at the Spoke or Pasta J's are parking in those spots,
Right.
yeah.
Any businesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, the ones that are directly adjacent to it, it's
Right.
not, there's literally nothing saying they can't park there all day long. It's legal, but just, I'm curious about that, yeah.
And
And
I've
I
heard business owners say that the guy next door tells his employees to park on the street, and I tell
Yeah.
them not to, and they park in front of
Right.
mine, so
Yeah.
an anecdote, I think that's part of it.
That's what I assumed, I just wondered.
Yep, you guys see, you're drawing all the right conclusions. Smart people thinking about this stuff. So, by the way, so besides all that data that we went through in terms of like measuring and looking at the actual observations, the other thing we wanted to do was look at use ITE parking generation manual to figure out what our predicted demand would be for the same area. That does two things. It validates what we're looking at, and then two, it also gives us another data point that was based on land use as opposed to like we actually consider whether it's a restaurant or what the land
Right.
uses are instead of just what people are using, right? We did this for the same area. It's done by land use, so we did it by city block and not by space, right? And so there's a calculator that went through. The one thing I do want to kind of mention here is that we also are able to calculate and look at an internal capture. Internal capture is the idea that people park once and visit more than one space, right? So if a strip mall has 5 businesses in it, they don't have to provide parking for all 5. You can group parking together and everybody can kind of share because you might visit 2 or 1 businesses. We always kind of have to guess at how much internal capture there is, but because we actually have real data from the drone, we actually could calculate that, and it ended up being about 52% from the utilization analysis. What that means is, on average, people park one and go to 2.02 businesses, or like chain 2 trips together per parking spot. Again, this might not sound cool, you guys have like long faces, but this is unbelievably cool if you're a parking nerd, because again, we're almost always guessing at that number, but we actually have real data, we can calculate it anyway.
Speaking of parking nerd, can I back up to
Sure.
page 29?
Yeah,
Where you suggest that we put in a 2-hour parking limit signs?
yeah.
Am I just really naive and have lived in big cities too long, that if you don't enforce it, nobody cares?
No, that's a great question. So the question is, if we put signs up, but we never enforce them on any level, how much, complacency or how many people actually obey the rules? And the answer is somewhere between 50 and 60% will. So they've done a bunch of studies on this where they've looked at if we just add signs and do nothing else.
And that's amazing.
What level of compliance do we get? And the answer is about half the people will comply. They simply feel obligated to obey a sign, even though there's no enforcement. And so, yes, we'll get people who will comply, and it'll be good.
Because when I lived in San Francisco, you would park there for years if you knew it wasn't going to be enforced.
Yeah, right. Yes, because you kind of learn that. But the truth
Yeah.
is that even our
Okay.
parking, people rotate out. You'll have a bunch of visitors who be like, I don't want a ticket, and they will have no idea that you guys don't enforce it, but it doesn't matter, right? They'll move on quickly.
Hopefully they don't watch planning commission meetings.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Maybe I shouldn't. Shouldn't describe that stuff in
No, that's
detail.
interesting. That's exactly what I wanted you to tell me, was that there are a lot of people out there who would feel guilty.
And we have been having conversations with the police department about ways to sign and mark the streets where they'll be more optimistic about parking enforcement.
Right.
but the business owners will chime in too to get people moving.
And it'd be nice to get the business owners to park their employees somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's part of the recommendations.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So the last, I guess, with the parking demand, one of the things that, again, we did this based on land use and came up with all the numbers. We calculated it. One of the things that's interesting to me is this one graph kind of validates the whole thing. Because if you look at the true observed utilization of what we did versus the predicted demand analysis based on land use, they're pretty dang similar. In fact, they are much closer than I would have guessed. And so, again, what this does is it says that the data we collected is a true representation based on what we should have seen. And it also says that the land uses that we have out there are appropriate for the parking that we have. Like, we're getting a good match with land use and the amount of parking that we have. I don't know if this will play. Can I click next? Or spacebar? Oh, yeah. So this, nope, they didn't play. I just went to the next slide. These are actually animated maps, but it doesn't look like they're playing. Yeah, they did upstairs. Yeah, I don't see them changing. They just animate over time. Anyway, this is the one. These are stills of 1 p.m. So this, you could just see how they observed against the predicted demand changes over time. But besides overall, those charts and kind of how they line up, they also line up geographically in terms of the spaces that we're seeing are the most occupied are the areas that the land use is telling us should be the most occupied. And that's largely driven by restaurants, kind of like the biggest demand for parking. But again, if you look at this, we could say on this graph, we can say that, we have a lot of there's a lot of excess supply of parking if you look at the entire area and the whole city overall. But if you look at this map, right in the heart of where the spoke is, right by that Center Street in Maine, that area that's red, it's both, in the observed and, and so that one area we might not have enough.
Be a good place for the parking garage.
That's a smart thing that somebody might say. So in terms of final conclusions and kind of where we got to where we are, the truth is we do have a lot of parking. There is a lot of green areas.
So Zach's parking lot back there by the creek, is that considered private, and did you study it?
So it is private, and we did not count it.
Okay.
And so we counted some private lots, but a lot of them we did not.
Okay.
If you go back to the individual maps, which are pretty far back here.
Right,
but
that's okay.
You'll see, some hotels we have data for, and we have, the McStiff's Plaza we have data for,
Right.
but other ones we don't. And that was a little bit targeted. We talked about that early on, about what's the value of measuring private spaces.
Right.
And so we largely ignored them from the analysis. Okay. So in some cases, by the way, we have all the raw photos. So if you want to go through and look at them, you certainly can.
My sister's named Nicole. Maybe she'll do it.
Yeah, get her to stare at all those aerial photos. Again, major conclusions that there's a lot of parking in a lot of areas, except right by that Center and Main, there might not be enough. That's that second bullet, that just those localized areas, it seems like demand is exceeding supply. That, ultimately, if we targeted this 85% utilization, and that's kind of what the national standard is and recommendations are for publicly supplied parking, right? Where the city owns the right-of-way and is putting up the maintenance cost, that we kind of target that, we have a lot that's less than that, and so we probably don't need more. The Main Street shoulder, we lose a lot on Main, the parking there, because it's not striped, and we just have a lot of loss because of inefficient parking and oversized vehicles. Restaurants are creating the highest demand for parking, and you guys are a little bit unique in that so many of your visitors want to visit these restaurants, and your weekdays act like weekends in other areas, right? Because there's such demand for restaurants. And then the other thing that, again, we can kind of measure because we can see all the individual spaces, is people were unwilling to walk. Moab is known as a hiking mecca, right? And yet,
300 feet.
while Main Street is packed, 100 East is always vacant, 100 West is almost always vacant. People, the way we measured it came out to 266 feet was the length people will want to walk.
That's
and if
funny.
you were 300 feet away from your front door, I don't
I'm
want to park.
tired when we get back to
100-yard
town.
dash. That's all it is, a 100-yard dash.
Yeah, and so that seemed kind of, and then you guys have already done a good job of making people more aware of the city-owned lot. So for final recommendations, how can we correct some behavior and look at this? One is parking should continue to be free everywhere. If you started charging, it would be a waste. It would cost you more than you'd ever get. The 2-hour sign limit, I think, is again a good idea because people will be more compliant than you think, and putting up a couple of signs is a good way to help get turnover, at least in those most busy areas right by Center and Main. And then you've already started with some of the wayfinding signs of how do people, because some people will, if they're looking at Center and Main and there's no parking right there, if you tell them, hey, parking available on 100 West, and then
Right.
people just need to kind of understand that a little bit.
What about registering it on Google Earth and things like that? Is it already there?
The parking.
Yeah. Does
yeah.
the city register? So if someone says,
question.
If
where
you
do
were
I park?
checking Yelp, hey, where do I park in Moab or
Well, if you are on Google Maps and
Yeah.
you look up parking, if you type parking in, if you're looking at Moab, just if you type
downtown.
restaurant in, it gives you a list of restaurants. That could be
Yeah,
a good idea.
Make a big blue lot with a
Yeah.
big P on it.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, just making people more aware in general will help make that lot get better utilization. And other parking too, again, parking one block off was largely vacant when parking
Yeah.
on Main was occupied, right? And
I
so
mean, yeah.
if people know, hey, you can park on other streets, if we just had some signs would help.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're willing to grow out with their parking, right? Like over by the park, there's lots of parking there.
There is.
Yeah, I think we
So-
should encourage that.
So maybe the people just need to learn how to park outside more, and they are, right?
Or the employees do.
Once that's filled up in the red, they start to move out.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
You see that in other areas, yeah. That's right. Well, and so, again, you can just, people are already kind of figuring out on their own, is kind of what you're
Yeah.
saying. And so, but wayfinding signs, again, always help, especially with visitors and that type of stuff.
What surprises me about this study was that number one, I kind of already knew what was going on. Number two is, my question was, why has the city been so hesitant in the past to actually have signage?
Yeah.
And I think what it was the city and the Chamber of Commerce, and I think there needs to be a little more open dialogue between the two, basically because this has been brought up several times before, and now that you've brought this in and we've got the data, it's showing that fact that needs to happen. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
good.
it certainly can start a conversation. The truth is that if you hear from either businesses or patrons of specific areas that there's not enough parking, you can kind of always either point back to this or say, maybe we need to do a better job with educating you about the parking that does exist, right?
Yeah.
And don't forget, though, there is a problem in the
Right
downtown
there.
area,
Yeah.
by center, and we're on track. I was going to just add this since we're talking about it. We're on track for the parking garage to come and play. 90% sure it's going to be where the city lot is right now. Probably functional within 2 to 2.5 years. We received hotspot funding from the state to build that garage. It won't be city money building, it'll be hotspot funding. And that'll create lots of opportunities downtown for that problematic area. And I think that the rest of the area that you've identified doesn't have those needs, but that area clearly has those needs.
Yeah.
When you say city lot, does that mean by the Moab Information Center?
No.
The one behind?
On Center
One
Street,
behind your
on West
office.
Center Street.
Oh,
Yeah, the city owns that one, and the one by the MIC is owned by the,
oh, I see.
and the preferred site is the city-owned lot.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, it's tough with the parking garage because you think of, and this is just me being maybe pie in the sky, but something that is a big infrastructure investment that maybe is going to be way less useful 5 years from now when we have ride shares, when we have a public transportation system. And I think as long as we're understanding that when real estate is so scarce and so valuable in town is a big commitment maybe of something that, I mean, now we were saying that lot where the parking garage ostensibly would go is never full. So do we need a parking garage there?
It's more full now since
Okay.
we've changed the signage.
Yeah.
We've already took one of Thomas's recommendations, so we've changed the signage. And I think the data is we're here now. 5 years from now, you could be right.
Yeah.
My crystal ball's not quite that good for 5 years.
But I mean, you know, the more cities grow and the denser they get and the smarter they get with transportation, we're going to have a whole bunch of empty parking garages in cities and communities all across the country in 20 years.
Maybe.
Just a thought, I just wanted.
I will tell you that to me, the big thing with the parking garage is that it's on the exact same footprint, so it's
Yeah.
not taking up more land.
Which is why I'm
It's
not
gonna
like, no.
add 200 spaces, and the money is a free gift from the state of Utah. It was a take or leave it type of thing from the governor, right? And so, if you said no, if the city pushed back and they hadn't, right, this actually helped, then the city doesn't have to pay for anything, and it doesn't impact land either, right?
And I'd like to see it focused on employee parking. I mean, what better thing to be able to park in the shade in the summertime while you're at your job?
As we go to, as we start design and construction, all those discussions will continue about usages, about, how much of it should be for employees so that the street parking is available for the tourists.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great backup plan. I mean, that's huge. Even if we have the infrastructure and the transportation, we're still going to need employee parking, no matter what. So that's a great backup plan 5 years down the road. We just sign it differently. And it won't be all visitors parking, it'll be employee parking only.
Did you have any recommendation, and I apologize, I didn't see this in the plan, about accessible stalls? Because I'm looking at the problem area right on Center Street, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me that if we are going to start either marking spaces on Main Street or I would like to see more stalls marked as accessible in those high value areas, which will keep them, yes.
That's huge.
Yeah. Because if you're looking at the ones that are right next to Pasta J's on the south side of Center Street, right there, none of those are signed accessible parking. And it would make sense to me to have, so you have all of the little ribbons coming off Main Street. If the few that are right next to Main Street on the side streets are always generally ADA stalls.
Right.
Because I think the ADA stalls are there, but they're,
Yeah, you can see the blue ones are
Oh,
marked
yeah.
as accessible, yeah.
yeah.
And that would, I mean, that would make, you know, that would free those spaces up for that particular reason where it's like everyone else can walk half a block from the lot or from the parking garage or
Yeah.
what have you. Because right now, I mean, there aren't a ton. There really aren't a ton. And you can see, I mean, there's none in front of Sabaku and 98 and all of those restaurants on Center Street.
You're right.
The
there's
closest
nothing.
one's at the information center over on that side.
Yeah, on
We've
that
got,
side, yeah.
you've
There's
got
two
it
over
on,
there and
there's
two.
a couple of them across the street from Sabaku though.
Yeah.
Because the PT's right there and they've got accessible stalls.
But it's across the street still, you know, and sometimes you have to dart across that part of Center Street depending on what kind of day and
Yeah.
time of day.
That's
Like
gonna end
that
up being
idea.
a four-way stop at some point.
Oh, sure.
It's scary right there.
So two things. So by the way, I will tell you that we looked at the number of accessible stalls, and you guys certainly meet the requirements from both the EDA and the state of Utah.
I
in
guess
terms
maybe
of, like, the
smarter
total
location
numbers.
of them
The
is more what
location,
I'm
I
saying,
like
yeah.
I like the corners there.
Two last things, just quickly about safety. One, we recommend red curb paint within 30 feet of the intersection. That improves sight distance, specifically for pedestrians as well as vehicles. And so there's a couple areas that just need to kind of clean that up. And the last one is the back-end angle parking on roads with bike lanes. That very last one. So again, that's a safety issue where we have bike lanes. It helps protect the cyclists as well as the drivers, and it also opens up the doors when you open your vehicle, feed onto the sidewalk, which is safer for
Right.
kids and everything else too. So
So
those
I
are-
do have a comment about that. I was in California this past weekend and was in an area where they had back-end parking. And I did a very short, very brief survey of the cars that I walked by, and I walked by 23 cars. And 7 of them were parked correctly, parallel to the
confusing.
lines. Nobody can back up.
Well, I did want to have Chuck, before you guys leave, just maybe you can kind of give him a little bit of an overview of the areas that we are proposing for back-in angle parking.
Worried about bad drivers out there that can't back up.
Well, the thing is, when you look at the movements, you still have to back up.
Yeah,
Right? It's the only difference is whether you do it on the way into the stall
Yeah.
or on
Right.
the way out of
If
the
you're
stall.
backing up into a spot or backing up into traffic.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask where in California you were?
Stanford.
Okay.
So I was in,
I was gonna say, I'm sure it was the
I was
Bay
living
Area.
in
but-
Tucson before I came here, and they implemented back-in parking there. And the first time I went, I was like, this is a little odd. I'm a traffic engineer. And by the time I was in there 3 times, I was a pro at it. I mean, you just have to accept it
Right.
and do it. So, 100 West, 100 South in front of,
The office supply store.
and off the office supply store, we're going to
Right.
implement back-in parking the week of April 29th. We'll let it, because we're just not quite done with the project.
Yeah.
We chose not to do it now in the middle of Jeep Safari, but we're going to do it.
Oh, come on, it'd be so fun.
My office is right there and I would really appreciate the
just wanna-
lunchtime
I-
entertainment.
People do.
I volunteered to go sit at Zach's and watch, but
You can have a beer on this patio.
And this is just a general comment.
So I was going to show you a specific. So one of the things, Allison, is that a lot of times when the road is small or slow, people are jumping across the median to like see a space and they just like front in.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so if the traffic is also tight, all right, if there's a lot of volume, then people sometimes don't feel the comfort of being able to back in.
Right.
But the truth is that on roads that either have a median or the bike lanes are a little bit more prominent or however it is, then you see much more compliance. And I was just going to show you one area in Missoula where, again, you can see 20 cars and 17 are backed in, and there's 2 that are fronted in, and it was because they shot across like the lane. And I suspect in California, people probably in a little bit more hurry, and it was probably a tighter street, and they could probably easily front in from the
No,
opposite.
they weren't fronting in. They just couldn't back up correctly.
They were crossing over the line.
Yeah.
Oh,
I will say that
Here's
I've
the
seen
line, here's a car.
I've seen people back into our parking here on Center Street.
Yeah.
And I'm often wondering, okay, so when you go to pull out of that spot, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
Because you're going into oncoming traffic.
So just bad
So
drivers.
there is an educational process that will happen with that, but
Yeah.
I think it's a great location for it. So.
With the back-end parking, just real quick, that's on the corner by Zach's there on 100 South. Is the city considering eliminating a couple of the first spots? Because that is such a huge problem area. And regardless of if there's a spot or not, half the time I see someone parked in the red right there. and then they back up into someone that's turning from Main Street
Right,
onto.
right.
It just seems way too close to the intersection where the real spots are now. Even like if ever there was an opportunity to just.
Yeah, we've looked at it when we reviewed the striping, and the state code says you can red curb at 30 feet
Yep.
back, so we'll make sure it's 30 feet back.
And then
But
put
we've got an
288
education
spots.
campaign that we're gonna start, and we'll be out there the first few days with the police department and some engineering department, helping people. We'll put in a couple of vehicles that are parked. So people
Correctly.
go, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like, in fairness to other
Yeah.
Yeah,
people.
that's good.
And
So
then,
and we're gonna monitor that, because I know right now we're trying to keep the same number of spaces, because
Yeah.
the local businesses are like, we need parking there.
Yeah, wasn't
Yeah.
it Vern at the furniture store? Like,
The thing about it is too, though, is that with the back-in angled parking, you actually have to go down the street further
Further,
to
and
back
then
in
back out.
instead of backing out into that intersection. So you do have to pull further down the street to back in.
That's true.
And you can actually see that intersection better than you can than if you whip in there and try to back out into oncoming traffic.
Should theoretically
Yeah.
improve the coming around the corner, holy smokes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
attitude. Yeah, you're exactly right.
and then also with technology, the way it is in all new cars,
With the
we're
backup
supposed to have the
cameras.
backup cameras.
I don't
So-
trust mine. It's there, but I don't trust it. I still look in my
I,
mirrors.
me
and
too.
look
I don't
behind.
trust it either. But I see where you're going with this. But it's going to be, I mean, generally speaking, it's going to be crazy.
And the truth is, if it's a failure after whatever the time frame is, we'll reevaluate it. I mean, we've gone to council, and council said, I want to make sure. Council said, try it, because of the increased bike safety, and that's a bike corridor for
Right,
us.
right.
In fact, they said 100 north by Moonflower.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
that's
were
where
there
I
other
think-
identified
Oh, man,
areas?
dude.
If
Even
you put
driving
back in
is
spaces
scary.
in front of Moonflower, I guarantee most people would be pulled in frontwise there because so many times, and I'm one of these people, the pull onto 100 North off of Main Street, wait for, and then U-turn into one of those spots.
Oh, yeah.
I do that almost every day. Safely, no one is coming, but, and then, if it was people, you would see a lot of the crossing the midline and pulling straight in there thing, like, super. That spot more than, I
Until we
already
educate
thought of
them.
that before you even.
Maybe that's where we put a median. A
Yeah.
planter median.
And it's
Yeah.
people's behaviors and it's
Seriously.
people's enforcement. I mean, if people see the benefits,
Yeah.
I'm sure you would come around to.
Oh, I would do it. I'm just saying, I was thinking like, oh man, if you're turning on and you see a valuable front of Moonflower parking spot.
Yeah,
Real quick, if I may, so we are not presenting this to you as part of the city general plan or anything. It's more an informational
No, it's great.
document for you. And
Right.
Lisa Cook, our communication manager, just installed a parking link on the website.
Oh,
City's
cool.
website to click the engineering department, and then there's parking. And as we get information on parking structure, this will be there ultimately once council approves this in a couple of weeks or comments on it. Hopefully they'll approve it in the draft. So there'll be more information there. So if you're interested or want to direct other people to it, that's a place.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's an outreach to the public.
Well, I think all of your recommendations are exactly the thing that to help us, every one of them, I think. I would agree to and say, yeah, let's go forward with these,
the good news is all of them are relatively low cost. I mean, it's just
Right.
restriping some signs and stuff.
except for the garage.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think with the red curb paint, are there signs there too typically? Because I feel like that would be really helpful.
Not
Because it's hard,
always.
it fades in the sun and then people don't, there's so many spots along Main Street where it's a red curb and it,
Well,
I mean, if it was
ultimately,
literally
Main
just
Street's
no
not-
parking in front of this sign, that one that goes, the arrow to the
So
intersection.
We've been doing that with our in-house public works crews. And one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is we've been contracting out for some of our striping. And we're finding out if we can get the striping companies to help us on doing the red curb painting, because there's always a conflict of, does the crew go out and do potholes or do they go do red curbs? So I
Right.
wouldn't disagree with you that some of it needs maintenance. They do try and keep up with it,
Yeah.
but we're trying to find other ways that we could maybe keep them fresher paint.
Yeah.
Because they
But-
try to do it every spring, I've noticed.
Yeah, but it's just a sign. I mean, no parking here to curb. You see those in every city, and we don't seem to have them a lot of those spots. So, and honestly, if you're an international tourist, you might not understand that red curb means don't park here. Even I'm just trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, where like signage maybe would be helpful.
We just did a sign inventory of the city. We've been
Yeah.
working on for the last 6 months. Believe it or not, it took that long. literally locating every sign in the city. And we'll use that, similar as Thomas has used this for, first step is
Cool,
inventory.
yeah.
We now have an inventory to figure out where our needs are, and I'm listening to you
Sweet.
about that.
Okay. Sounds good, thank you guys.
On the parking garage, I don't know if this is appropriate right now, but how do you plan on getting in and out of that with the downtown bike plan kind of on First West and First North?
Once we have our consultant on board, that's we'll be evaluating alternatives. We'll go through an alternatives evaluation of, where's the best place for ingress, egress?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have 2 locations or 1 location? Do
Yeah.
we have pedestrian access? We're going to go through the process when we get there. I've had discussions with consultants who want to do that work, but we haven't made any decisions yet. It'll come out as part of, once we have them on board, we'll go through a process to figure that out.
Is First North still like the major plan to have the bike crossing Main Street right there to get to
Both First North and First South will have east-west bike connections.
Okay.
Yeah. But nothing on Center, for example. Yeah.
Another thing too is, I know that cars, or there was a trend early on, about 10 years ago, that cars were getting smaller. So your turning radius was a little tighter. And that's something that we brought up when Center Street was remodeled and down, was narrowed down. And my question is, as a traffic engineer, and as you've seen other parking lots in the city or private parking lots like the hospital, the parking stalls are getting smaller. Unfortunately, what's happening now is that things are getting larger again. And so we haven't found that happy median, especially when we go into this new parking garage, because footage costs money. And so what I'm concerned about is it going to be tight will it be tight like the hospital or city market, or will it be, do you understand what I'm asking?
So, real quick, the answer, you can usually tell who did the parking striping if it was an engineer or an architect. Architectural invariably make them smaller. Engineers will invariably make them larger.
Ah, there you go. That's my answer.
In any case, parking stalls are required to meet our minimum standards for private parking lots of 9 by 18 and a half. So that is a standard parking stall size that is required by our code.
Okay.
And so on public streets, and so that parking garage.
That would be fine. Okay, it would be a little bigger. Yeah, because I can't take my truck into the hospital.
So I have another question, and I'm not worried about time because we can hit the other one later.
Apparently, I've just been cast aside.
So you mentioned that we're losing 16 to 20% of our spaces from people parking incorrectly and oversized things filling up our spots. Any suggestions on what we do with those oversized things?
So that's a good question, and kind of gets to what you were saying before. The truth is that the garage might be better served if it didn't have, dualies and people trying to enter with trailers and everything else, right? And so the plan, and there is a website for this, and I mention it on like page 2 on previous studies. I talk about the hotspot, and there's actually like a link in there. You can type in and take a look and look at it yourself. The analysis they did identified, besides the garage, like a trailer drop-off lots on both the north and south side of town.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That would be just kind of like gravel lots, and then come up with a specific location, like it should be right here. But the idea was that if you are coming to town and you're towing your Jeep or whatever, your car show weekend, you can kind of drop a trailer there and then take your car into town for dinner or whatever it is.
And that works?
The truth is that it depends on the areas and kind of, at least in this area, it can be a little bit, speculative. But the truth is that if we restrict it, those people will find places to kind of go.
Okay.
So Thomas, I have a question for you, and I think I know the answer to this question, but this commission has been very adamant that we need to modify our code to require, especially hotels, to provide oversized vehicle parking. Would you say that that would be a recommendation based on this study, that if we required any future hotels to make sure that they provided oversized vehicle parking, that should be something included in our code.
So one thing that's certainly clear to me in terms of looking at this is that the businesses in Moab, lots of businesses, hotels, restaurants, all these, are using the publicly provided, the free on-street parking for the way they run their business, for housing their things, for staging their vehicles, for loading up their trailers, for doing kind of whatever. And the truth is that the more you can get the businesses to kind of bear the brunt of, of doing that on their facility, on their land, as opposed to on public land, the better off the city would be. So yes, if a hotel
Pretty
is
sure we
going
knew
to
that.
host a
Certainly
bunch
with
of
hotels.
yes, if they're going to host a bunch of people that bring in trailers, and I've stayed at the Hilton, what's it called? The new one? No, the new one. It's got the. It's not, is it the Hyatt?
They're all the same.
No, it's got their own garage. It's got the frontage on.
Oh, yeah, right
Well,
on.
my
Homewood
Vida?
Suites?
Yes, Homewood Suites.
Yeah.
I stayed
Yeah.
there, and they load up that whole front area with trailers, and they'll have like 6 or 7. And I just got my little car, and I kind of go back to their garage because they try to squeeze people in. But even then, if you have 10, you only have space for 6. Even
Right.
that's not
Right.
enough, right? So yes,
Which means
I would
they're
say
popping out.
onto the
onto
street.
the street.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah. And so yes, the more that the businesses can provide for their own customers, the less the city has to do, the better off everybody
Good.
is.
Correct.
We want to go with that.
They're all aware, and this has definitely been an issue, and it is something that we have encouraged every hotel that has come in within the last 5-10 years to provide, but we still haven't put anything in our code, so I think that's probably a big priority that we need to focus on.
Yes.
While we're,
So by the way, if
Or
you
in
stare at these
the
maps, which
moratorium.
I have done and I don't recommend, but you can see individual utilization down, like way down here by the Moab Adventure Center, where you can clearly that they're either parking vehicles or staging employees, whereas up north, like in front of Wendy's, the spaces are literally never used, not even one time.
Yeah.
You know why? Because
Right.
Wendy's has a ton of freaking parking in their own lot.
Yeah.
Right? And so why would you ever park in front? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so, you can see a lot of trends just in staring at all the data.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, it's like, I know, just there's certain businesses that I know in town, just from employees that work there, that are very adamant about their employees. Like Poison Spider, their employees do not park on Main Street in front of Poison Spider because they want to leave that open for customers and for people running in and out, and they
Right.
park behind, so just stuff like that. And I think something that really jumps out to me is like just delineating specific parking stalls on Main Street. That recommendation just seems so overdue.
By the way, and Alan, to your point, is how compliant people will be. The wife will nag the husband, hey, you're over the line here, move your car
Yeah,
up. for us."
exactly.
And so people are more compliant than you think.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
thank you guys.
Thank you so much,
You
you
guys,
guys. It
this
was
is
awesome.
Super interesting.
It was. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. By the way, Chuck has all of our data, the area photos we shot, which, by the way, the other benefit of having the drone footage is it's actually true documentation. Because the only way to measure parking is have somebody stand with a clipboard and mark cars. But we have a photo record that we can go back and look at the
Right.
individual pictures.
So
That's
thank you.
awesome.
And thank Nicole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank her for counting.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Summer, sorry.
We're,
Take a
we got like 10 minutes. Okay, no
Yes,
worries.
say about affordable housing.
No worries. I'm not worried about you. Now that we've
Barriers to affordable housing.
Now that we've discovered all things parking, barriers to affordable housing.
parking.
So you guys have, as you can see, we've been working on barriers to affordable housing for many, many years. Some things have gone through. If you look at the draft from January 13, 2011, we've since changed the lot sizes. Minimum lot size now is 5,000 square feet. We've reduced the setbacks. So we've made some changes, but we're not there, obviously. I mean, I think if we were there, we would probably have more housing developments, and we don't. So this first sheet that you got was put together by Tracy Dutson, our housing specialist, and this is probably the most recent evaluation of the barriers to affordable housing in our code. I think they're pretty similar to the ones we identified 8 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But they're here. And so
would you like us to do with this?
Yeah.
You know, I was directed to have you guys start discussing barriers to affordable housing. The specifics, though, that were asked and didn't get in this packet were the ADU regulations. So we don't know where PAD's gonna go. We're still hoping that PAD survives, but we don't know where PAD's gonna end up. So one of the things that we can do to help, I guess, try to increase affordable housing is to maybe look at our ADU regs and see if there are things that we can relax so that people take advantage of building ADUs more than they do now. One thing that I can think of that I had people, you know, ask about is in the R2, the maximum number of dwellings you can put in an R2 is a 2. So you could have a twin home with an ADU, or you can have a duplex.
Yep.
Is there anything wrong with allowing a duplex plus an ADU?
Not at all.
So that's something that we could look at, you know, in some of those zones. We did decrease the size of ADUs, so that hopefully will make it easier for people to be able to put them in. Right now, I can say probably one of the biggest factors there, my latest or last understanding was that an ADU was not required to install separate connections you could kind of decrease the cost because you don't have to provide a separate connection.
Are you talking about sewer?
Water and sewer, they can share the connection of the main home, but it does create an impact on the system. So, but our impact fees are pretty significant. And so I don't know if there's a way that we can offset impact fees, if our workforce affordable housing fund, I'm not sure about the legal logistics of whether or not that could go to offset that, but that's one of the complaints that I've heard is that the 4,000 square foot house and the 500 square foot house pay the same for impact fees.
Same fee.
So that was one of the things that Joel wanted to have the commission start looking at, were the ADU regulations, but unfortunately I forgot to put them in your packets.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
But 1770, chapter 1770 has the ADU regs.
Okay.
We can put them in, not next time because that's your joint meeting, but the time after to maybe start looking at them. But if you want to look at them ahead of time and start making a list of things that you can think of that could help, or if you want to look at some of these that Tracy put together where we can start making an impact.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, I think lot size, minimum lot size is a huge barrier. It's still pretty big. I mean, on the scale of things, that's huge. And just the fact that it seems very arbitrary to me that you can have a twin home in an ADU, but you can't have a duplex in an ADU in that zone. Why?
Maximum number of units per lot is 2.
Exactly.
But if an
twin homes on
ADU,
2.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to deed restrict an ADU and it's a benefit, then why shouldn't you be able to include an ADU with a duplex?
Exactly. I mean, even allowing, I think, I would like to see more multifamily development allowed zone-wide. If it makes sense, if your lot size is over X, you may have X number of single-family units on it.
Wouldn't a twin home be able to have 2 ADUs since they're individually
Yeah,
parceled?
so, basically you'd have this twin home and this twin home and they could both have an ADU, but if you have a duplex, you're on a single lot.
Okay,
You've
I
already
see.
hit your capacity of 2 per
Right.
2 units on that lot.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, each side of the twin home could have an ADU so
Yeah.
that you still end up with 2 units on the lot.
So like the community rebuilds homes that are on the corner of 4th East and 100 North, that is technically a twin home and an ADU. It's three houses,
It's
right?
actually 4 because it's 2 single-family
Okay.
lots and then the twin home lot. So you could have,
ADUs on each
ADUs
lot
on
if
every
there's
single
room.
one of them.
If there is space.
If there was space. One of the other issues, I mean, with an ADU, you're only required to provide 1 parking stall for the ADU. Single family requires 2 parking stalls, so then you need a total of 3 parking stalls on your site. So it's something to look at. Like with our employee housing downtown, it was reduced to, I believe, 0.75 per unit for the employee housing. I don't know if that's something we could look at for,
Wait, it's two per single family?
It can be front to back.
yes, you can have them tandem,
Yeah.
but you are required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces for single family, 4 for a duplex, and then at multifamily, it ends up at 1.5 spaces per unit.
And we do have to keep in mind that every time we reduce their parking requirements for any dwelling, we're compounding the parking problem that we are building into that we just heard about.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
The parking
Well, I
problem
mean,
we
if
don't
we-
really have though,
Well,
is what
but,
that data
we
shows.
just have to keep in mind that if we're worried about parking in Moab, and then we decide to reduce the number of required parking lots,
Yeah.
parking spaces for any unit, dwelling unit, then we have to realize that if there are 2 people staying at that place that we've just reduced from 2 parking spaces to 1.5, then those people are gonna park on the street.
Exactly.
So we just
So,
have to
but
be careful with that
Are
balance.
you aware that 70% of the lot front has to be landscaping? Isn't that right, correct? So if you have if you have a 35-foot wide lot and you want to put a home in there, you can't put a 2-car garage in it.
Right.
It's got to be 70% landscaping, which means it's only going to be 11 feet for one car can get in there.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
And we have to look at things
We
like that.
have to
but
change that. It
but
should
we
be the
also-
opposite. It should be
but-
30% landscaping and 70% parking.
Probably, but I think we need to take a serious look at that because we also don't want people parking in their front yards.
Wait a
least
second.
there's a
Wait.
Yeah,
There is
there's
a
a balance.
So you're saying that you don't want people parking in their front yard?
Well, I don't want my neighbor concreting over his front yard and towing all of his vehicles up into his front yard. But that's
So
just
you
me.
want it on the street?
Well, yeah, I would, but we have to keep in mind that as we develop this code, we have to remember that people do drive cars, and we have to keep that in mind when we develop code, I think. I think we're on the same page, but
Well, I hope so, because
yeah,
because I'm just going to tell you that my project, where I have 35 feet, I was going to put twin homes in.
you can't.
I cannot. Do you know why?
Because of the parking.
Because I can't get 2 cars on it, and that's ridiculous.
Because you-
That is,
Yeah,
you just can't do it.
right.
I think
So,
it-
for the benefit of everybody in the construction field and who's going to build these twin homes and affordable housing and all that, we've got to give them a place to park, and we've got to pull that out.
Right, and so I think it needs to come from our, I don't think we need to reduce the parking requirements, we need to reduce the lot requirements
yeah,
for
the other lot
landscaping and things like
requirements.
that.
Well, I think and we can certainly have, look at, there's a ton of parking on the larger streets in the R3, for example, whereas then there's really teeny weeny streets sometimes. I don't know if there's a template for this. I might just do some research and see if there's ever code that's based on, I think it would make a ton of sense if we had parking requirements that were based on street frontage width too. Like, it makes more sense to have more on-lot parking required on Nichols Lane than it does on 100 South right by the baseball fields. Like, I don't know if there's a way that we could write that into the code where if the street width, curb to curb is less than X, then there's more off-street parking required on the lot on a new
But
development.
that's not acceptable, is it, Summer?
It's something that could be proposed. I mean, it would be a code change.
But right now, it's not acceptable.
Not
No,
right now,
no,
no,
it's,
but that's
it's
what she's
just,
saying.
it's just by lot size and just by zone,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, we used to have a minimum lot size of 100 feet for a duplex, and now the minimum lot size is 50. Well, you've reduced it down, but you've also, we've maintained the parking requirements for that, but if you had a 100-foot wide lot, you should be able to accommodate off-street
Correct.
parking. But if you have a 30-foot wide lot
Yes.
and
Right.
the street's wide enough, perhaps the on-street parking can count toward
Yeah.
that. I don't know.
And I
Well,
think we're gonna have to,
When the city reduced the lots in the R2 zone to 3,000 square foot, that was a big, beautiful thing they did. But they forgot to change the parking in it.
okay.
We've got to catch up. If we don't, we're going to lose. People can't build.
So
Okay.
proportionality is important, it sounds like
Right.
what we're looking at, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to call the workshop closed. Please remember, if we can check out 17.7 for next workshop, which will be in May,
Yes.
and see if we can't get through some of the ADU stuff. And we've got
Good.
6 o'clock. Okay, I call to order the April 11th, 2019 meeting of the Moab Planning Commission at 6 p.m. first item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. This is for items not on the agenda. If you would like to speak, please fill out a public comment sheet that can be found in the hallway. We have anybody here who would like to speak?
Oh, just before we get to the public hearing portion, the comment cards are out there, but I don't think I left a pen out there, so I'll put that out there.
So why don't you come up and talk to us, and then you can fill out a card.
Okay. And this is for items not on the agenda. So if it's something that's on our agenda tonight, don't talk about it now. There'll be a time. This is just general.
Can I talk about the workshop?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm vice chair of the county transportation.
If you would introduce yourself into the microphone, just so they can have that for the record.
I know who you are, but not everybody else.
Most of us know who you are.
Yes, boss. I'm Joe Kingsley. I'm vice chair of the Grand County Transportation. And I want to thank the city transportation study group. I don't know all their names, but I did review their study, and it's very impressive. And there's a lot of data in there that will help us move forward. The only element that I want to address is the parking garage. It's extremely expensive. And just to be transparent, our committee is working with UDOT and the county to use that funds that has been set aside for the hotspot to use for more creative, out in the future type things. For example, several cities with really compact downtowns is using shuttle services and requirements to stay parked in your hotel. For example, if you go to Zion's, when you check into any hotel, there is a sign that says, "Leave your car in our parking lot." And there is a shuttle that takes you to town in Springdale. Other cities like San Diego, San Francisco, and others in California are using electric gym vehicles. These carry 6 people, they're electric, and they're free. And you download a phone app, you leave your car in the hotel. And we're calculating that the hotspot funds could easily fund the shuttle and the hotspot transportation, free transportation. And the way it works in Anaheim and San Diego and San Francisco, you have a phone app, you're guaranteed a car will pick you up, the gym, the little electric car, will pick you up and take you to your spot within 6 minutes free. And what funds it is in the car, the Chamber of Commerce has ads of things you can go to and see and do. And I just want to let you know that we appreciate all the work that has gone into your transportation study. All the numbers are very beneficial. The only area that we see a hiccup in is the garage. It is not, and the gentleman that gave their presentation even said after a few years they don't really know how well it'll be used. Spending that kind of millions of dollars for something you don't know how the future will pan out is throwing a dart at the wall. And we would like to do something more creative to keep the cars off the street and in the parking lots at the hotels. I just wanted to add that, and I'll fill out a card if you want me to.
Please. That way we have you on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Would anybody else like to speak? Okay.
I do.
Sure, So this is for things
This is
not
not
on-
for the public hearing, or did you want to speak for the public
Yeah,
hearing?
so
Okay,
hang on.
yeah. Nope, you're good. We haven't gotten there yet, so you have a minute.
Okay. Action item number 4, Planning Resolution 04-2019, a resolution recommending approval of a hillside development permit for commercial development of a property located at 1520 North Main Street in the RC Resort Commercial Zone. Summer?
They're back. Welcome back, by the way. This is for the Moab My Place Hotel Hillside Development Permit. You originally saw this back on February 14th. There have been some revisions to the plan to meet the elements of the Hillside Development Permit, and I will have Craig Larson and Chuck, if you'd like to come up and speak regarding those revisions. They've essentially kind of redrawn the site to meet the elements of our Hillside Development Ordinance. So, if you'll recall, this is the subject property. Let me switch my view here. It is 7.2 acres. And then this is actually their updated site layout with the slope study. And it's probably better technically explained by the engineers. So I'll have you guys come up if you would like. This is Craig Larson. He is the applicant.
Hi, Craig Larson, civil engineer of record for the project. We did make some revisions to the site. The reason being, rearrange things is there was some Chuck interpreted some things one way, and I had interpreted them the other way. And so we met, got on the same page, and made the revisions so that we were under the same interpretation and could both get behind it and felt positive about it. And I believe we meet the ordinance and all requirements 100%. And
I'll just keep showing you the pretty pictures that I have. And so then there's this one.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is that that's a true statement, that all of our engineering comments have been addressed, and we believe that this proposal, as shown now with the revisions, complies with the requirements of the Hillside Development Permit. So.
Where is your containment pond? Like water containment?
It's underground, underneath.
It's underground? Okay.
Yeah, underneath the parking lot and driveway.
Okay. Because there's a development that is, I can't think, is it south or north of you? That it's actually south of you that has containment ponds, but the infrastructure for those containment ponds has already started to deteriorate. So I just want to give you a heads up on that because it looks really bad. It just looks really bad. And it's a brand new development. And it just looks like all the sand and stuff, is it the Hyatt? Which one? The brand new one? The Hyatt. If you look back there, behind where the containment pond is back there, the sand is totally gone in the containment film, the plastic. It's totally exposed. And once you expose that to UV, I don't know how resistant that is, but
It has to be replaced.
It has
to maintain it, put the soil back over.
exactly, and it has not been. And so, yeah, and it's just, if you're going to do something like this and go into the hillside, it's going to be a lot of upkeep, and I understand that you understand that.
Yeah, and if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right.
Right.
Is how we want to do it.
Okay.
So I noticed that there were some spots in there, it looks like on the edge of the parking lot, that moved from the 25 to 40% back down to the 40 to 45%. I don't know if you can, there's one other shot of that one.
No, let me go the right way here.
Okay. But it looks like, according to that one.
This one?
Yeah. So right here, we're running from purple to orange and back. Does that matter?
What it means is those areas, and if you click to the next slide, I think it's a little bit easier to see. What it means is those areas are, the hillside ordinance is applicable. So the green and teal shade on this one, that shows us those are those areas that have that colors, and so the hillside ordinance is applicable, and so we have to meet certain requirements with the hillside ordinance, which we've met.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure since we're moving from percentage to percentage.
Look at those oversized parking spaces. Nice job.
Their need.
We tried.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for setting
Thank
a
you
good
for doing
example
that,
despite
really.
not being required by law.
yeah,
Just
that
to,
was
just to
nice
be
of you.
clear, this is for the hillside development permit. The site plan will
No, we
come.
know. We're giving a lot of encouragement that it stays that way.
They're close. This is kind of step one. And then once we get the hillside development permit, their site plan will come back to you for approval.
Okay.
If there are any comments similar to that you would make during the site plan approval and come to mind now, we would certainly accept those and be able to bring them.
Staff will make sure you get those.
And that, the oversized parking is at the forefront right now, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
For new developments.
Yeah.
We're struggling with that.
I mean, it's where this is going to be located. It's a little less of an issue with, it's you're going to have it on site, or people, they're not going to park down on North 191 necessarily as much. So it's not like if you're right in the heart of downtown, but still think that's a huge comment to provide for that, realizing it's going to happen.
Any other questions?
So your resolution has been updated to remove the engineering comment requirements. Again, the separate site plan and the development is subject to the Assured Workforce Housing Ordinance. They're aware. We've kind of talked through some different ideas. We'll get there. But this is for the hillside development permit.
Okay. Call for motion?
Where is it? I'm scrolling, trying to find it. There it is. Okay, I motion that we recommend approval of a hillside development permit for commercial development on property located at 1520 North Main Street in the Resort Commercial Zone, which would be Planning Resolution 04-2019.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thanks for getting that figured out, you guys.
Thank you.
Unanimously. Sorry. I'm going to talk real slow till she gets back.
It's fine. We'll transition over to the next item. Brief pause for the audience, sorry. Take a breather, stretch your legs. Thanks, Chuck. Did you want to let folks know that if they're here for the public hearing,
Yeah.
Okay. No pen, though?
So action item number 5 is actually a public hearing for the outdoor lighting and sign illumination standards. If you would like to speak during this public hearing, there are cards out in the hall. You need to fill it out. If you need a card or a pen, I have a pen.
Do you want me to find an extra pen?
Yeah. Summer, thank you.
Hey, you found a pen out there? What's that? You found a pen out there?
Excuse me.
Okay, I open the public hearing at 6:15 p.m. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the proposed ordinance? Thank you. George Johnson, come on up.
George Johnson. I live at 425 East, 100 North, and I'm opposed to this ordinance. Quite a few different ways. Some of it's good. I don't mind a lot of it, but the darkening of the street lights is a major concern for me. Already from the end of 4th East on 100 North up to the Rockridge Center, the city has already darkened those street lamps. And the whole block, city block there, for the senior citizens to walk in is completely dark at night unless there's a moon out. And I don't know why they've already darkened it. My neighbors have complained, I guess, that the lights are shining in on their houses or in their yards for some reason. But that's quite a thing to do, to have our senior citizens walk in the dark if they walk early morning or late at night. And that's a hill. It's not level ground. It's a good road, good sidewalks, but it's a hill. And one thing that I'm opposed of is, the reason I'm opposed for this, darkening the streets, is my mom's cousin was hit by a car and killed on 4th East in '87. Poor lighting conditions. And so there was a family of 7 boys that were without a father. And a lot of the Holyoke family is a large family in the community. And it's quite a thing to, I mean, we invite hundreds of thousands of people into our community now, and we darken the streets in our neighborhoods and say that we're doing this for a little certificate that says we are a dark sky community. Doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if you've talked to the city police or the sheriff's office. When I talked to Zachariah Levine for the county, he hadn't until the day before the city voted. And when I talked to the chief of police and the sheriff, they were quite concerned with the safety aspects of dimming our streets and our sidewalks. A lot of these sidewalks have overgrowth on them, trees or bushes growing into it. The pedestrians have to get out onto the street to walk there. I want to take a little information from the Ped Bike Info, and it's a website put up by the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, and the North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. And it says pedestrians and bicycle fatalities increased by 31% in the 10-year period between 2008 and 2017. During that same time period, total traffic fatalities decreased by 0.8%. At a national level, the majority of pedestrian fatalities, 73%, and bicycle fatalities, 58%, occur in non-intersections. Lighting conditions are the major factor in pedestrian fatalities. 3/4 of pedestrian fatalities nationwide occur in dark conditions. By contrast, 45% of bicycle fatalities occur in dark conditions. Time of day plays a role in all this as well. The hours from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. tend to account for more pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities than any other time of day. So that's quite a major liability for the city to take upon themselves. Again, we invite hundreds of thousands of people. Many of them are bicyclists, and many of them get out and walk the paths or walk the streets in the evenings too, to see our beautiful community. And for us to just throw all that away or put them in the dark, I think we owe it to them and to our residents to at least keep the street lights bright. I can see billboards and things that do cause a glare on the highway, but most of this I'm against it. And for that, you know, I would encourage you not to pass this at least as it is written. Again, both the city and the county, exactly the same ordinances, exactly the same, exactly word for word.
They're not.
And they've all of it come off the Dark Sky Community website.
So I would like to say that our focus is not on turning off our
Can you
street.
speak
Oh,
more?
sorry. Our focus is not on turning off the street lights. Our focus is to minimize the trespass of those lights onto places that they don't belong. So
I can understand that. I do. And I don't want my lights shining on my neighbor's yard. I don't want theirs on mine. But there's a shotgun blast with this ordinance. Just doesn't seem the way to do it. Change it, do the trespass stuff, but dimming our street lights. I invite you to come up to 4th East and 1st North and walk up at 9 o'clock tonight, walk up to the Rockridge Senior Citizen Center and see how dark it is.
but the street lights are there and they're just not
They
turned on?
shielded them. Now, one good thing about it is the city didn't shield the back side of the one, and it lights my driveway entrance. Comes back about 30 feet. And so my driveway the entrance is lit. But from there on up the hill, it's not.
Okay.
And
Are there specific provisions in the ordinance that's proposed for passing tonight that you would like to address? We understand your concern generally, but a lot of what you're saying doesn't seem to track with what the current version of the ordinance is. And so I would love if you have that handy, if you're able to point to a page or a section where it's calling for, I guess, what you're saying to happen.
Well, like I said, you put, if you walk down the street at night, you can see that the street lights are high enough, and many of them are within your shielded thing. But to put shields on it the way it is, I mean, you take a light that covers 200 feet, and you shield it so it's straight down, you lose about 50 feet on each side of lighting for the sidewalks. And it makes it hard. There are many citizens, older citizens, that walk the streets early morning. I'm the traffic guard at the I'm a crosswalk at the guard at the HMK, and safety I deal with. And there's a lot of women that walk through there in the mornings. It's not so much now, it's getting lighter earlier, but in the wintertime, it's dark when they're out walking. And they've made their concerns to me. There's a lot of places where there are no sidewalks, and a lot of places where the trees are growing out in front of the traffic or the street lights. Those need to be trimmed. My one recommendation that Zachariah Levine said for my street is to put another street light in, right in the middle, where you had one that, or two street lights at each end that covered that gave that enough light. But you walk a lot of these streets at night, and there's trees growing out or long distances between the street lights that cover the sidewalks don't get very much light.
And that might be something to address, the fact that right now what is glare is making it seem like one light is lighting more, but ideally with the downward, with the properly downward shielded lights, if you have them sighted properly, they will light better and more efficiently and actually more on the sidewalk rather than all of that lost above the horizontal plane.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But what's the cost of putting another street light in when you had one that would cover both ways? Now they do make lights that are directional. You can get LEDs now that shine, you can almost map out your lights with these smart lights that would spread it horizontal or however
Yeah.
you want it, along the sidewalk and not so much out in the street or in the yard behind it. But this is great cost. Look at, like I said, this also is anti-business. If you look at all the businesses on Main Street and the lights that they have up, and for them to shield each one of them would cost them quite a bit of money. Look at the Sunset Grill up there. 90% of their advertisement is lighting, and it's been that way for, what, 60 years? That's their form of advertisement. And going up their street, they've got lights that mark the roadway, and they're more than 18 inches high. So they would have to change each one of those lights. The lights they have around the outside and different things, it would cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now I know they can pass it on to me and you. They're not going to eat the cost. They'll pass it on, sure. But still, they've got to go to the extent or to the thing to do that. And so it's going to cost them a lot of money. The Mexican restaurants, a bunch of them, use the lights. That's part of their business. And for them to shield it, instead of, I'll just say my front yard, I've got a motion detector light on mine. And when somebody, at night, it's very dim, but if somebody comes up, it trips it, and it will light up my whole front yard. And I like it like that. I can look out and I can check my vehicles, everything in the front yard, make sure it's okay before I go to sleep.
And those are great.
But if I shield that, instead of shining out 30 to 40 feet, it will shine 6 feet right on my sidewalk.
But as long as it stays on your property, it's fine.
Well, I agree, it is.
You know,
on
a timer.
There would be a little bit of trespass to the
Right.
yard to the side of me. I've got the same lights in the back, and I would shield those so my neighbors in back. They've got lights up above that shine in my yard, but we don't care about that. Mm-hmm. We're fine with it. We're not interfering with each other. We're okay with that. So, and the yard that it does shine on is a field that my neighbor, there's nobody living in it, so.
And we certainly don't want to, well, we can get to that when we have our discussion, but thank you.
The main thing is cost. And again, if I was to put lights and get enough light to light up my yard, I would have to put about 15 to 20 lights around the perimeter of mine shining in. I would have to go to that cost to light my yard up so I can see my cars and make sure nobody's going through my equipment and things that I've got out there. And this is the way many businesses are. You say Utah Power and Light's behind this. Utah Power and Light has a big shotgun light that you can see from Main Street from time to time. But they need to light up their equipment so people don't come in and steal from them or ruin it. And all the businesses up and down, it's the same way. If you've got equipment, you want it lit up so you can defend it or protect it. And I know they'll argue, well, if you can see it better, the thieves can take it easier. That's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm taking too much of your time.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson.
But please, if you're going to vote or pass this, amend it quite a bit. Leave the street lights out and make more. A lot more lights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal White.
Hi, I'm Crystal White. I'd like to just talk briefly about a few things. The biggest concerns people have is safety, and by no means is a shielded light less safe. In fact, it's a little more safe because it blocks the glare that goes into your eyes, which actually blind pedestrians and drivers, and shielding the light just directs it down to the ground where it's needed and not glaring into people's eyes. So I would really urge you to pass this as is. And to my knowledge, there is absolutely no study that proves that more lighting makes a place safer. And I don't I've never heard that argument other than in articles. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Crystal.
Sharon Russell.
Hi, my name's Sharon Brussel, and I'm here to talk in support of the lighting ordinance. It's been a long, long, long time coming. I think the first effort was in 1989. One of the main goals is that we don't light up the sky, and you don't see a town the size of Moab from the International Space Station, which you can right now. Many towns, and where these ordinances came from was from many other towns looking at their ordinances that have current dark sky lighting, that have not seen any increase in crime, and have actually seen business go up because businesses that are lit appropriately actually are more inviting to visitors, and that has been studied. I think there's a real misunderstanding about what this lighting ordinance does. As you mentioned, what it does is it prevents light from going straight out and up, not down. So that's what the partially shielded and fully shielded lighting means. It keeps the light where you need it, when you need it, in the amounts you need it. The exciting thing about this is Rocky Mountain Power is very on board. If you've gone to some of those meetings and seen the two women that come down from Rocky Mountain Power, they're very excited. Their engineers are super excited about this. They've come up with street lights that are more attractive. They light better and a better color for safety. The engineers are all in on this. In fact, they've had calls from other cities now wanting to know what we're doing here and working with Rocky Mountain Power. And so they're putting a whole program together to retrofit and offer new street lights. As well as the vapor lights, the farm lights you see around, those big, bright things that are not shielded at all and covered entire property and properties next to them as well that have light shining into their bedrooms. They've been working on that with a new design. For that, it will not cost residents anymore. They can offer it to them at the same price. Again, it's the better color lighting, it's the safer lighting, it prevents the shadows that you get when you have bright glare lighting. So that's really exciting that Rocky Mountain Power is really stepping up to the plate and sees the value in this. As I said, other towns, just in Utah, Torrey, Springville, Park City, and the entire town of Flagstaff has these type of ordinances. If they can do it, certainly Moab can do it in a very safe way. If lighting's needed somewhere, that can be provided in a way that fits with these ordinances, keeps the light on the ground, keeps people safe, provides it where you need it, so it's not going up into the sky. When I first moved here in 1990, I lived in Moab till about 2011. You could see the Milky Way when I moved here, from town. It was awesome. You could walk out your door. I would feel very safe with the lighting that I had available to me from my porch lights. You could walk out the door and see the Milky Way. You can no longer do that. So everyone in town has been ripped of that ability to do that. That's a cost, I think, to those people that move here to have a rural experience. I live in Spanish Valley now, almost all the way to the San Juan County line. I walk every night, my dog around a little loop. I look down at Moab and you can definitely see the night glow. It's glowing off the cliffs. It did not glow off the cliffs when I first moved here. It's on cloudy nights especially, it's shining up into the clouds, and the glow from the clouds is amazing. I would invite you to come out and walk the loop with me sometime and look back on Moab and see what you see. It's very disheartening. It's very unnecessary. And that's my bottom line. It's unnecessary. You can have growth, you can have development, you can have safety, and you can have the night skies too. So I really appreciate you considering this ordinance. I would love you to make the first step, a real step to making this happen for Moab and everyone that lives here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon.
Anyone else like to speak? Ladies in the back. Okay, I close the public hearing at 6:35 p.m. Moving on to action item number 6, Planning Resolution 10, 2019, a resolution recommending to City Council approval of Ordinance 2019-03, creating Chapters 17.09.060 and 17.09.465 of the Moab Municipal Code, establishing outdoor lighting and sign illumination standards. Summer, do you have anything else for us?
The only thing I would say is that right now we currently require all commercial businesses to have fully shielded, downward directed, full cutoff fixtures. So we've taken strides to make sure that that happens, at least in commercial development.
New commercial.
New commercial development.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is a big
So
change.
this is, I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
this is in line with what we've been requiring commercial businesses to do anyway. So I think,
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out, that we,
So currently, any new developments would be required to do what is ostensibly in the ordinance that we are discussing and potentially sending on to City Council tonight. But where this would be the difference for the public that are listening is that this ordinance would require the businesses that have been there longer, who definitely there, which is where a lot of the non-compliance is coming from, where the unnecessary upward glare lights to come to the table and to also work to benefit the nice guys of the community in the way that all the businesses that have been built since
the most
this
recent, the recent
would
ones.
do.
Yes.
And there's a time frame. 5
Correct.
years? 5 years?
It's 5 years.
5 years.
Yep.
And that's, I think, very fair.
Reasonable.
Can I address one thing with
And
Mr.
there's assistance. There's copious assistance from a lot of sources for all sorts of homes and businesses to come into compliance. So, yeah. Yes, Brian.
Mr. Johnson, so what you've said is not fallen on deaf ears. I think that's specific, though, because in general, I think this plan is really, really good for our area. But as far as the old folks' home and traveling up and down that steep incline, there are sidewalks there, isn't there? Are there sidewalks there?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So where maybe they can't see so well, or there's an issue there, I think that maybe we should provide more lighting.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But not take away from what we're doing.
Well, and
Correct.
trim trees that are blocking, there's quite a bit in town.
Yeah.
I just drove around one morning real early and looked at this was just as the trees were starting to bud. So once they get leaves, it's gonna darken a lot of streets.
Yeah.
For the record, I want to be very careful that you have closed the public hearing, so
Okay. But
talking
can he
with,
know? Does he know
talking
how
with
to?
people in the audience after you've closed the
Okay,
public hearing
okay.
doesn't create a level playing field for others that would maybe want to rebut or something along those lines. So I just want to be careful with that.
And you also have ordinances that stop new residential. They have to meet these codes.
Thank you, sir.
too. So it's not just businesses.
So I would like to revisit the code in 1709-067 that does talk about our streetlights, and it says roadway and streetlights are prohibited unless recommended by city engineer or required by UDOT to provide safety for the public. And I think that if we recommend this to council, we need to make sure that they are aware that there are dark places in this city. I walk every morning before 5, and there are streets that are dark, whole blocks. And if those need to be addressed, then we need to address them, not just more light, but smarter light. Bring the light on the sidewalks. And I think that will come from this ordinance.
Correct.
If we can put it together properly.
It's going to be a reevaluation of all light everywhere in town and the county, for that matter. And so things like that, which, now there's a process to report if there's lighting where it's inefficient or unsafe, but this will kickstart the city to do it on their own, because they're going to have to do it for that anyways.
So I hope those concerns will be shared, and they're in the code. And I think that if we can pass this through, then we can get the changes in the street lighting that we need for the places that we need it, because it's here.
What else do we think? Where did we? So let's see. Yeah, so there's a provision in 1709-069 where the city shall perform 2 audits of all outdoor lighting in the city, 1 2 years and the other 4 years after the effective date of this ordinance. So that's, That's 2 more audits than they're doing now. So.
Does that mean that they
Sir, public hearing's closed. We really cannot accept any more comments, but thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Brian, did we cover your concern?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, ladies and gentlemen?
No, I think this again, we did get a few email letters in support, general support of the ordinance. I just want that as part of the record. This is something that's been coming for a long time. There's by and large been a lot of excitement about it because of the reason that it's providing lighting, but it's providing smarter lighting, and in a way that does not let perhaps easy economic drivers for some people or some businesses or some interests in town mar the community experience overall. There's no reason a business can't have the lighting that they need to maintain their business and to advertise their business or what have you, but be done in a way that doesn't impede on the rest of the community for their own economic gain. And I think that's something that's really important, and it's a very reasonable trade-off. There should be no safety concerns. There should be no economic concerns with it, with the time limit that you have to put this in place. So I think it does a good job, as written, of balancing the implementation period with the real concerns of getting everyone in compliance.
And we do have to keep in mind that this applies to the city and their streetlights as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I've already talked to them. Thank you.
So just so I understand, any kind of uplighting is prohibited within this, not even if it's under a soffit or a patio or a building structure that's accent lighting like some of the hotels.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, they're gonna have to change all that.
Or turn them off.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they can have them during business hours?
As long as they're not, yeah.
And
Yeah, we've addressed safety.
Mm-hmm.
I think even security. If they have a light that comes on for motion detectors, that's good because it goes off.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, could I call for a motion?
I will motion to pass City of Moab Ordinance 2019-03, an ordinance creating chapters 1709-060 and 1709-465 of the Moab Municipal Code, establishing outdoor lighting and sign illumination standards.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Action item number 7, future agenda items. I'm assuming that the barriers to affordable housing will pop up next for us at a workshop.
Probably, like we talked about last time, your next meeting is Tuesday. It's the joint City Council Planning Commission workshop. I've heard that the consultants for the future land use plan may be there, but I don't have confirmation on that. So as soon as I know what's happening, I will get the information out to you guys.
Okay.
But it will be on Tuesday, not on Thursday.
Right.
At that time?
Somewhere between 5 and 7.
And this might be just me being picky, but you know what? I think the city council should bend to our schedule, maybe next time. Why do we have to go on their schedule?
Well, the reason why we did it this way is so that you you would have that Thursday off, and they're only quarterly. We tried to pick the best.
I
thought that it would be easier for the planning commission to attend city council and skip the second Thursday meeting of the quarter than to have them come here, and then you have to conduct additional business.
I think she's on our side.
After.
I'm just saying that.
Well, ultimately, you would have if city council comes to you, you would have your workshop, but then you would potentially have other agenda items that you would have to address after the workshop. And in this way, the workshop is your agenda item and you are finished for the week.
Anything else?
I thought that that would be nice for the planning commission. Sorry.
I know, but I'm just,
It's nice to have a little variety.
that's true.
So that's the 16th, right?
That is the 23rd.
23rd.
Third, okay.
23rd.
Okay.
And somewhere between 5 and 7. But I will make sure you have an agenda as soon as I know what's happening.
And we don't have any other hotels or anything coming up before us.
You will see the site plan for the Moab My Place Hotel, and then there's another one that came in. We received their application before the moratorium, but they're still going through the process and receiving comments, so it'll be a little bit before you see that one.
Okay.
But those are the only two that are
Okay.
in the pipeline right now.
So we can plan on affordable housing, chapter 1770 with ADUs and,
I would definitely take a look at that and make some suggestions that you feel would help to relax those regulations a little bit so we could get maybe more ADUs.
okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else needs to be discussed for the good of the commissioner? Okay, meeting is adjourned at 6:46. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Dark skies, woo, woo.
You were missed this past week.